Jerry Ashton again with 15 Minutes of Fact here on WGRNradio.com. I've got a very interesting guest today because as a byproduct of my travel to Philadelphia to celebrate the 4th and the Occupy encampment there, I made sure to meet today's guest for 15 Minutes of Fact, and I'm glad I did. I'm speaking of Stephen Dotson, a Quaker and activist who brings an interesting and unusual background and skill set to Occupy and the Occupy movement. Active person. He's a social networking multimedia specialist, currently employed as communications director for wagingnonviolence.org and as communications specialist for Envision Peace Museum in Philadelphia. His background includes involvement in 99%, the Occupy Wall Street collaborative film, the Earthquaker Action Team, and has served as an advisory board member for Swarthmore College for Global Nonviolent Action, and as a trustee for Friends Publishing Corporation. Kind of makes you wonder what he does in his spare time, wouldn't you think? So welcome to the show today, Stephen.
Hey, thanks, Jerry. Glad to be here.
I'm pleased to have you here. I want to spend some time with you because you're being both by heritage, I suppose, or choice, a Quaker, and by decision an activist. I want to know how both of those things manifest in the Occupy movement for you.
Well, I think it's not uncommon to see that there's a spiritual foundation that supports a lot of social change throughout history, whether it's Gandhi or King or Dorothy Day. We need that sustenance or something to draw from in order to have the inspiration to keep going. So for me, I found that within Quakerism, and Quakerism has given me a lot of tools to really stand up strongly and speak truth to power and take care of the poor, the sick, and the oppressed. That's been a big part of the Quaker heritage since its founding, a very radical, idealistic interpretation of what it means to be a peacemaker, what it means to build a just world, and each individual's role in doing that.
Well, I find it interesting that there was an emphasis on the individual and their responsibility to stand up to what was wrong. There, of course, if you don't mind my third parting you, Quakers are known for having made the use of thee as an ordinary pronoun. They have historically refused to participate in war. They're known for plain dress. They refuse to swear oaths. It sounds to me like they're a perfect hotbed for activism.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're a lot of hippies, beardos, socialists, and radicals ready to change the world. I keep good company, you could say.
Well, since you are in good company, just exactly how will you be noted in the footnotes of history, either for Occupy and for the Quaker movement?
Well, currently, Quakers have some very interesting campaigns going on around mountaintop removal, and that has coincided with some collaboration with different Occupy encampments. There's a group you mentioned in my intro, the Earthquaker Action Team, equate.org, if you want to learn more information there. They have targeted some of the banks that are the financiers of mountaintop removal and held marches between Pittsburgh and Philly and really have built on their campaign using Occupy's energy. It seems that Occupy is going to be a source of inflating and enlarging campaigns that are happening already, and has provided a common language and base for these things to just rise up another level of magnitude. So that's one thing that I think we're going to see noted in history is that there's been a real push to stop mountaintop removal these last 5 years, and it's really growing still, and Quakers have had a very active role in that.
Well, I know that on the website wagingnonviolence.org, there's a major story on mountain mobilization organizers, the ones who were cracked down on and arrested for being in West Virginia's Lincoln County. These are brave folks of all religions and ilk. And as someone who is being noticed, certainly by way of the hard work that you're putting in, and you're standing shoulder to shoulder with so many people who as individuals are making a difference. How did that lead to your participation in the 99%, the Occupy Wall Street collaborative film?
You find little opportunities and you just keep saying yes. You just keep stepping up and giving what you've got. Consider myself extremely lucky to be involved in this film project. I'm something of a novice when it comes to film still, compared to those I work with who have directed shows for HBO or released independent films already. I just showed up at an event in New York on October 15th and caught the right 90 seconds of 20,000 people singing This Little Light of Mine in Times Square, and sent that in. And since then, it's been a roller coaster ride, and I've grown from just being a contributing filmmaker with one little bit of footage to managing a lot of their social media, helping with fundraising, becoming a co-director, co-producer, and really joining a community of filmmakers who wish to tell the story of the Occupy movement in a new way, in a way that doesn't have the
spin of Hollywood, you mean, so to speak?
That's right, and can be heard by mainstream America, because I think we all know that unless this movement really transforms itself into something that can communicate to anyone in any blue-collar town in America, it's not going to be a successful movement. So,
well, when you have award-winning filmmakers like Audrey Ewell and Aaron Aites helping with this and deciding to tell that story, and then reaching out to so many both professional and fledgling filmmakers to make that contribution, it should be quite a film. Is it out as yet? Is it being created? What is the story on that?
We're in post-production currently, and we're just very, very excited to get the news that we received a grant from the Sundance Film Festival to help with our completion. So we're excited about the possibilities there. You can see a short early trailer that we put together at 99 then the word %film.com. And that's probably the best snapshot you can get, although soon we'll have a more polished trailer out there.
That's super. Well, since you've had some length of time, both observing and participating, what do you think that Occupy has succeeded in from your point of view?
I think there's a tremendous power in having organized local communities in the same structure all across North America. I think we have built a common parallel systems in all these communities, and a common language for us to speak to one another in. I'd say it's been the best networking opportunity for people who are passionate about peace, justice, and democracy that the U.S. has seen in decades. This work has been going on for a very long time, but we haven't had the language to share and communicate it, nor the networks to coordinate through. And Occupy has certainly changed that dramatically.
I see Occupy as being almost the big tent that people refer to, that underneath this tent, so many people with presumably diverse backgrounds, goals, interests, yet are united under what has been coined as the 99%, united in some very fundamental beliefs about what needs to be changed for this country to be governed properly, much less governed around the world. So if that's where Occupy has succeeded in creating that network of communities, where do you feel it may have failed up to this point?
I think the name, it says it all. Occupy. If you name yourself after a tactic rather than a larger identifier, say, I feel more akin to the 99% as a movement, as a name for a movement. The focus on occupying as one single tactic, I think, has become a distraction at times, and it's hard for people outside the movement to relate and identify with that if they themselves haven't occupied. And that's a problem, because we want people to be able to relate to this. Everyone's the 99%. We're talking about issues that are going to affect people now and will affect them for the rest of their lives. I mean, long-term effects of this economic recession are already becoming manifest. So I'd say there needs to be a new vision of strategy and a new sense of identity that we can extend beyond those people who are already in the tent. and letting go of that single tactic of occupying is going to be a crucial part of that. Gene Sharp pointed out 198 different tactics of nonviolent resistance, occupying being only one of them. So let's examine the other 197 and build a dynamic, strategic movement that can really go after things bit by bit.
Well, let's talk about that from your point of view of participating in something called the Earthquaker, which I imagine comes from the Quaker movement, the Earthquaker Action Team. What is that all about, and is this something that Occupy could learn from?
The Earthquaker Action Team is a very interesting group with some very strong leadership. George Lakey is a professor at Swarthmore and a heavyweight of social justice going back decades. He studied under Bayard Rustin and has been part of trainers all over the world through his organization, Training for Change. And George has really been one of the big inspirations and forces behind the Earthquaker Action Team. He's a Quaker himself. And my participation with them has focused on PNC Bank as one of the largest U.S. financiers of mountaintop removal. And it's been interesting to see the different ways in which we find leverage. You work in debt. You know the importance of leverage in any kind of discussion.
And I, of course, am quite familiar with the egregious actions of banks that undercut social fabric, all in the name of profits. Now, since we have Quakerism on the table, what I find intriguing is that Quakers have founded banks and financial institutions such as Barclays, Lloyd's, Friends Provident, and now here you are, many years later, protesting in front of some of these banks. So how does this all square? The idea of being an activist and yet being making sure that governments and that financial institutions toe the line and live up to their role in society.
I like that you pointed out that Quakers have started some banks themselves. PNC Bank actually comes out of a merger of Provident National and Pittsburgh Bank, I believe. And Provident Bank was started by Quakers. So in essence, we feel as though, in a certain sense, we are trying to stand up for the values that part of PNC was founded on. They call themselves the Green Bank. They come from a Quaker background in part, and so that strengthens our desire to make that statement. Let your yes be your yes and your no be your no is a common Quaker phrase, and that's trying to speak to truth telling and integrity. And when a bank calls itself the Green Bank, for instance, and markets itself that way, but is destroying entire communities in Appalachia in the name of profit through mountaintop removal coal mining, then there's a deep hypocrisy and falsehood there, and that's what we wish to point out. The ways in which we do that by tactic range from being theatrical and musical to more practical divestment efforts. You have to start eating the elephant one bite at a time and take those bites from different parts. But we're getting there. I really do think.
Well, do you think, staying in the religious, spiritual realm, do you think that churches, in addition to or other than the Quakers, have really lived up in their role to support good social change in the United States and to support what's happening in the Occupy movement? That hasn't been my experience, but I'd like to know what you think.
I think you see successes and failures. I think the protest chaplains up in Occupy Boston are an excellent example of the positive that can come out. Also in San Francisco and Oakland, I know there's a very vibrant interfaith working group that has organized a lot of the things there. DC, there are some really powerful actions that use that line of religion and of the Bible, the golden calf, the money there's taken in the temple. There's power there, and sometimes it's been used. Other times we've seen failure of institutional religion, I would point out, to be supportive, to play the historic role that it should be playing of sanctuary, of being the place where people can organize and be safe and find a moment of rest, a moment of peace, and a bit of food. Those things are crucial for any good social movement. We saw in the Arab Spring all these actions jumping off on Fridays because people are in the mosque on Fridays for Jummah prayers. Those spaces should always be the locus of community and the place where people can sit down with their neighbors, whether they be religious or not, but have a moment and a safe space to plan and talk. So I think we've seen the failures of institutional religion to support the social movement, specifically Occupy, but personal spiritual language and inspiration has been a crucial part of making sure that this happens.
Well, we are just about complete in our 15 minutes of fact. You've created a safe space for us to hear about religious and approach to this thing called Occupy, this thing called protest. And I guess I would want to complete this by asking you what you've learned from coming of age in America during this eventful period of history.
Wow. 4 years ago, I had a mutual fund, and I was trying to invest and thinking about my long-term future being entangled with the stock market, with capitalism and all this. And I had credit cards, I had student debt, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to let go of those things because I believe I'm not an exception when I look around and my peers and I say we will never ever try and invest in the stock market. We will never try and carry debt as a way of life. I think there's big lessons that we've learned by being the inheritors of the fallout from all this. And one of my concerns is that generationally things will start to break down a little bit, and people get a little upset when you talk about class war. But generational war to me is much more frightening, and so I see there being a need and an opportunity for my generation to come together with other generations and really examine how we can start thinking 7 generations down the line, as the native peoples have for so long.
Well, Stephen, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us on 15 Minutes of Fact. I want the listener to know that if you care to get in touch with or learn more about this extraordinary man, you can email him at swillisdotson, that's spelled SWILLISDOTSON, at gmail.com. I certainly suggest going to his website, which is wagingnonviolence.org, or by way of the Envision Peace Museum at envisionpeacemuseum.org. Naturally, you would expect to find him on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. What is your page there, or pages that you recommend on Facebook, Stephen?
You can find me personally and subscribe to me at facebook.com/swillisdotson, SWILLISDOTSON.
And on Twitter?
On Twitter, I actually don't exist on Twitter as a person, but you can reach out to the organizations that I work for. So at 99_film and at WagingNV.
And don't forget at Envision_Peace.
That's right.
So, Stephen, any last words of advice you might give people who want to become activists like yourself?
Just step outside your comfort zone. Think about what your gifts are and what the world needs. Find that intersection and just lean into it. Keep saying yes.
And this is Jerry Ashton asking all of you out there to say yes to a better world and yes to participating in it. I want to thank everyone for listening in to 15 Minutes of Fact for WGRNradio.com.